Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I am super excited to be here, and we have an exciting set of discussions and perspectives regarding the how to navigate the challenges of implementing LLMs in the enterprise. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by a group of fantastic speakers and panelists. So I'd like to welcome Zainab Jamal, who's a Director of Data Science at HPE. Kylie Borovic, who's the Director of Data Science at RealPage. Amar Gowda, who's a Senior Principal Product Manager at Oracle, specializing in AI/ML incubations. And I'm Yunus Amar, VP of Product at Waller AI. So, just like I said, I'm personally super excited to be here. Before we get started with our presentations and conversations today with our presenters and panelists, I am interested in also hearing from our audience today. And there's going to be a poll question that you will see on your screen very shortly. The question is, since we're talking about LLMs today, how far along are you in your LLM journey? Are you already in production? Plan for the next 6 months? Plan for the next year? Or not a priority? I do actually not expect anyone here to say that LLMs are not a priority. But let's see what the answers look like. Let's give it a few seconds. Okay, already in production. 6 months away. Okay. Keep the answers coming. I see about 40% of the audience has voted, 60% now. Currently not a priority. I think after this webinar, it'll become a priority. Six months. Let's give it a few more seconds just to get through the audience. All right, looks like we have a good mix here. Already in production, planned for the next 6 months, which is typically what we're seeing right now, given that ChatGPT has been out for about 18 months. So of course, everyone is gearing up to launch some LLMs in production. And with that, Zainab, I would like to actually take the floor and share your perspective on best practices and how practitioners are implementing LLMs today based on what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and yeah, please take it away.
Thanks, Amar, and thanks for inviting me for this excellent discussion. So essentially, I am at HPE and I work in the global marketing organization heading the digital analytics and data sciences work for them. And as part of our efforts, we have been looking at LLMs as well. For today, I thought I'd share some perspectives based on the work that I did with some other collaborators in terms of really thinking through what it takes to really take some of these LLMs into the business workflows and just take them all the way to the end towards deployment and production. So next slide, please. So I think, as all of us have seen, there's a lot of developments that have emerged in the LLM landscape, and it has been a transformative force. So we are seeing a lot of kind of interesting use cases and implementations that are being deployed across the different business domains. And we also see a lot of that happening in marketing as well. And the issue with the LLM is that this whole process is riddled with a lot of decisions and critical trade-offs that a typical project team or a company has to take, because some of these LLMs are complex, some of their deployments can be complex, or where they kind of fit into the workflow can be complex. So you have to be really thoughtful as you make those decisions about where you want to really use them. And what we noticed was that as the whole landscape has been evolving, there was not a comprehensive framework that could be, was in place to really help guide some of the practitioners. So four of us kind of got together based on our experience, both from the academic side as well as deployment in different companies. We came up with this conceptual framework that I'm going to walk all of you through today. The next slide, please. So essentially what we have seen is that literally the step one, which is kind of true, it used to be true in the world of machine learning and AI, but it's even more true in the world of generative AI, is the identification of the business application and the use case behind that. What is the business value? What is it that you're really trying to bring the LLMs to do for you? And do you also have the data behind that to really do that application? And so that step one becomes even more critical than it was in say, the world of machine learning, where some of the models were more simpler to deploy or did not have to have so much of, say, infrastructure, other kinds of costs associated with that. So here, the step one is essentially really identifying very thoughtfully where is it that you really want to deploy your LLMs, what is the business use case that you want to use it for. And once you kind of have that clearly defined, the next set of questions that comes into play is, okay, if you're going to really use the data for this application, is that data something that needs to stay in-house within the company's boundaries? Because the data might be sensitive, it might have confidential information, might be proprietary information that is only it cannot, due to various regulations and other kinds of pieces, cannot really go outside the company. So you need to then really look at the data that you have and decide whether this can stay or has to stay in-house for various reasons. And the data could be for various parts in the whole development of the LLM. It could be in the training, it could be in the prompts, it could be the outcomes that come out of the model. But again, being able to really go to that next level of detail and see what is the data that you need for building your LLMs, and then does the data need to stay in-house? And based on the kind of answers that come to that kind of questions, you then have to decide which large language model you're going to really use. So for example, you decide in our case, and I'll walk you through a couple of case studies. We had data that we were using to really inform, say, campaign analytics and insights kind of a use case. And so in that case, the data was proprietary, it was in-house, so it had to stay in-house. So the next question then comes in, okay, what kind of model should you use? Are there models out there that are related to the domain in which you want to really use the LLM? So for example, if your use case is much more related to, I know, language translation or something much more generic, you might be able to use some of the models as is. But on the other hand, if the use case is very specific to a certain domain, maybe it's a legal document summarization kind of a use case, then you need to make sure that the are there any foundational models out there that you can use as is, or you need to really adapt them for your purpose. And that kind of brings us to the next step is, okay, because your domain is very domain specific, and you don't really have a model that is out there which can really serve your purpose, then you need to think about the next step, which is, do you need to fine tune, or do you need to engineer your prompts to ensure that the model is really kind of giving you the kind of performance and the kind of responses that you are looking for? And again, this kind of goes back to the question, okay, do you have the data that is there to really, again, do the fine tuning, do the prompt engineering? And again, where is the data available? Is it in-house? Is it in an outside external domain? Does it need to stay within the company's four walls? And then, kind of the last step in that, step 8 is essentially saying, okay, when you're looking at the, all these decisions, all the way from, whether what data you have, whether what model that you use, or whether you need to fine tune or prompt engineer, all of it is kind of dependent on the performance of your model, how accurate your responses are. Is the model giving you the kind of accuracy or the performance that you expect it to deliver for your application? And then if not, then you kind of keep going down that iterative loop where you change the models that you're using, or you change the data that you're using to train the model, or you do more fine tuning and prompt engineering to really help give you the performance that you really care for, that you need for your business application. But once you have it all figured out, then the last step, which is in terms of model deployment, where do you deploy that? Do you deploy it on the cloud, on-prem? What's the kind of latencies you're looking for? What's the kind of user experience that you want to kind of have out of your application? So when you kind of think through which LLMs to really deploy, you need to kind of go through all these various steps and have those critical decisions made at each of the steps to really help you move further along in that deployment journey. Next slide, please. So as I said, one of the things we did in this paper was essentially to kind of use two kind of stylized case studies, one from the B2C world and one from the B2B world, to really help kind of walk through some of those conceptual steps in the framework. So the one of the case studies that I'm going to talk a little bit more about is the second one, which was essentially looking at a digital marketing analytics kind of a use case. And so here what we had was marketeers who were really trying to measure the performance of their digital campaigns and looking at different metrics associated with the typical digital marketing channels like paid search or display ads, and just trying to figure out whether the campaign was really landing with the objective that it had. And they had a dashboard in place that was kind of giving them some of those metrics. But sometimes you also, as a stakeholder or a decision maker, want to kind of dig a bit deeper in terms of insights, where you may not have that information readily available on the dashboard. And also the underlying data foundation that kind of sits behind these metrics might be very complex. And so typically what happens is that in a company, you might have a very skilled set of resources who do the data analysis and, folks, or you'll have the BI folks who really know the data, they know the architecture, and they're able to really go in and write some complex SQL queries and really come up with the responses. So what this application, in this case study, was that the large language models were leveraged to really help create a question answer based system that could interact directly with the data and then essentially translate a more of a business or a natural language kind of a question into the underlying SQL query, and then get you the answers back in a more business friendly way, and thus reducing the time that it takes to really get to that answer. So going to the next slide. So essentially, the application was kind of geared towards personas like, say, a data analyst or business executive who really want to interact with the data and really understand, say, how their campaign is performing, or how many, say, engaged visitors came to a site on a given month, or did they have engagement rate? How was it comparable to, say, a previous quarter, and so on. So you could have different types of questions that the users might ask from the application, and some might be easy, some might be medium, some might be hard. And so the idea was that could you really build a solution that was able to take some of this business questions which were more in a business language, take that, convert that into a SQL kind of a query, hit the database with the query, get the response back, and then present it back to the user in a much more of a business friendly way. And what that really helped do was to obviously increase the time to insights and decision making, increase productivity, because now you don't, you're able to really get to that information faster. You also kind of reduce the learning curve that is there, because you don't really need people with really super high skills in terms of or knowledge of the underlying data architecture and structure, because you could potentially directly ask with the simpler questions. And so kind of moving towards a low code kind of an environment. And then one of the things here was, like I was talking in the earliest thing, in step one, once you know this was a business application that you wanted to really build and use the LLMs for, and the data that you're using was internal data, then it kind of helped answer some of those questions, saying, okay, the data has to stay in-house. So the choice of the LLM has to be something that could work in the internal company ecosystem. Also, because you needed to share with the model business context, for example, a definition of engagement or a definition of a lead might be very company specific, and so you need to be able to give that context to the model. And so you couldn't just use a model as is off the shelf, but you needed to bring in the prompt engineering and the fine tuning to really improve the performance. Because one of the things that was kind of as part of these experiments was obvious was that if you use the large language model as is, the accuracy was pretty low. But as you did more prompt engineering and as you added fine tuning on top of that, the accuracy in terms of responses increased dramatically. And so again, just like in this use case, being able to really look at that overall framework and make those decisions step by step, and then keep iterating on those steps till you really come to the level of performance that you want out of your model. So that's kind of the broad framework. that we present in this paper. And I think next slide just adds a bit more details. So next slide, please. Essentially the same use case, but just adding a bit more of a detail in terms of how the architecture flow kind of works through here. So you have if you look at the bottom on the model inference, you have a user question coming in English. It gets pre-processed to kind of just clean up some of the data before you use it to train the model. And then once the model is trained, it then sends that SQL as an output and then queries the database. And then in return, you get the response back, which is again then pre-processed to then give you the answer in an English kind of a business-friendly language. That's I think with that I will hand the floor back. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. This was great and super insightful. Just before we hand the floor over to Kylie, I have a quick question that came up for you specifically. If you are an AI practitioner or effectively a technical decision maker today with a background in data science, software engineering, ML engineering, what are some of the, I would say, pitfalls that you're seeing or that you have seen when trying to implement LLMs for the enterprise, especially given the hype cycle that we're currently in? Yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on that.
So one of the things we've realized is that the same pitfalls that existed for the world in terms of when you tried to kind of implement machine learning models into your workflow. So it was very easy to do proof of concepts, but then when it came to actually putting them into deployment and production, you really had to kind of think through the whole sequence. Where will this model fit into the existing business workflows? What was the business value it's going to generate? And the same kind of thinking has to be done in the case of LLMs as well. But a lot of it has to be done at that step one, because you want to pre-think all of this, because some of these LLMs are complex, investments are heavy, and they take time and effort to build. So you want to do a lot of that pre-planning and thinking of exactly how you will take this proof of concept all the way to production. So business value driven kind of becomes an important criteria.
Sounds good. I think our friends at Gartner will be very happy to hear that, since prior to LLMs, they said that 90% of AI models fail to produce meaningful ROI. So I think that stat will still hold, but we're here to change it. So with that,
exactly.
I would like to invite Kylie to share his perspective on LLM implementations in the context of basically experimentation, production, and also the recent investments that RealPage has made in advancing LLM implementations. So Kylie, please take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Eunice. Good afternoon, morning, everyone. I'm Kylie, Director of Data Science at RealPage. And like Eunice said, today I'll be talking about the possibilities and challenges of deploying custom LLM solutions at scale. So today, we'll talk about custom LLM deployment, focusing on scale while exploring kind of the benefits, challenges, and strategies we're developing here to overcome them. So next slide. So first, why is there such a growing demand for custom LLMs? I think we know there's a huge hype around this right now. And people are starting to find out that these generic models often fall short, especially in enterprise settings, where there's really a nuanced understanding required out of the models. This is especially true in like really niche industries and use cases. So, one size doesn't necessarily fit all here. A generic LLM, while good, isn't necessarily the best for every job. And often using, one of the big LLMs can be like trying to use, an atomic bomb to kill an ant or something like that, right? We're not just not necessarily good for specific tasks, might not perform as well as like a 7 or 8 billion parameter model that is fine-tuned for that task, or even smaller models, right? The 2 and 3. So there's a competitive advantage here. By offering these custom and specialized LLMs, we can really differentiate ourselves to meet these client needs. We're exceeding expectations and giving them really a true competitive edge. This level of personalization can become a really powerful differentiator in the market. Likewise, like every client has specific needs. So, like from healthcare to finance to legal, every kind of industry has its own jargon regulations. So even within a company, right, really large organizations, like different departments might need LLMs trained on their unique data and terminology. So with this, that like presents a lot of opportunities at scale. And as we, master the art of deploying a large number of these tailored LLMs efficiently, we open the doors to new markets and revenue streams. So, the potential there is really limitless. But of course, that's a lot easier said than done. So next slide here. Um, while this potential is really undeniable, scaling their deployment presents a lot of challenges that we need to acknowledge. So, first, model development and customization. Developing these is not a one and done process. Each client's needs are distinct. There's a lot of extensive data collection, meticulous fine tuning, ongoing adaptation. And these are all to ensure the model stays relevant and performs optimally. There's a huge resource intensification as we deploy more and more LLMs. The demand for computation skyrockets. And I think we all know like getting GPUs right now is pretty hard to come by. So we need to really think about how we strategically invest in our infrastructure and explore innovative solutions to manage these. The other is kind of version control and management. So imagine you have hundreds, if not thousands, of unique LLMs for clients or different departments, each with different versions updates. It's a really complex puzzle to ensure consistency, track changes, and maintain kind of a seamless performance across that whole landscape. Another one here is, client data privacy. When dealing with client-specific data, especially in regulated industries, like data privacy and security becomes really paramount. So we have to figure out ways to implement robust measures to safeguard sensitive information and comply with all the relevant regulations here. And last is kind of, cost scaling. This isn't really just about technical challenges, it's also about financial. The cost of training, deploying, and maintaining a large number of models can quickly add up. So again, like we need to find really innovative ways to optimize our processes and keep those costs manageable. And with that, next slide. So, how do we tackle some of these challenges of deploying these LLMs at scale? Our approach involves a combination of like proactive strategies, some really technical expertise, working with vendors, and a commitment to especially responsible AI. So first is kind of like looking at the architecture of the LLMs. Think of it as like building with Legos, right? We don't want to create LLMs from scratch every time we're building a custom LLM for clients. We design modular components, adaptable frameworks that can be customized and reused. This saves us a lot of time, resources, and ensures greater consistency. So think of it like having your own personal model garden where you can kind of pick and choose components off the shelf. Whether that's like your input-output modules for pre-processing, encoder, decoder layers for generated language. Task-specific heads is a really big one for us. So tailored for specific tasks like question answering, sentiment analysis, text summarization, SQL generation. The list kind of goes on. But we're trying to design these as much as possible to be interchangeable and adaptable. So we can kind of mix and match them, adjust parameters, and add new modules as needs arise for different clients. Examples of this is sentiment analysis. We've all done that. Can we add a sentiment analysis head to quickly create a model capable of gauging sentiment and customer reviews, or maybe a real estate LLM, right? Leveraging a pre-trained encoder, integrating an industry-specific or client-specific terminology database, and adding a question and answering head on top to build a model capable of assisting with real estate investment and data analysis. What does this do for us? It allows faster development, reduces complexity, better consistency, more flexibility, and the big one for me, efficient resource utilization, right? We don't want to duplicate efforts on any of this stuff. So, to accomplish a lot of this, we're investing heavily in automation tools and platforms. These tools automate everything from model training to deployment to monitoring, and even some aspects of customization. And another technique we're starting to use is, when applicable, like federated learning. We explore, these techniques to kind of train models collaboratively across multiple data sets and even clients, while preserving that privacy and confidentiality. Ultimately, this helps us get more robust LLMs. The next one is, cost optimization. We're committed to delivering value while also managing costs. This means utilizing cloud resources strategically, implementing efficient inference techniques, and exploring lighter weight models where appropriate without sacrificing performance. Another big one here is, do your models need to be real time? We have a lot of LLMs, that can run in, batch processes at night off of CPUs, which is a lot cheaper. So that's something we're exploring heavily right now. And then last is, client education. Custom LLM is only as good as someone's ability to leverage it. So, we're investing in comprehensive client education programs, empowering them to kind of understand their model's capabilities, limitations, and best practices for optimal utilization. Cool. And then, kind of a deeper dive into deployment considerations here. Again, cost is a big one for us. So looking at kind of our infrastructure. So, utilizing the appropriate GPUs for training and inference, utilizing them only when needed. We're looking into, like specialized CPUs for near real-time models, or even just batch ones like, ARM or Ampere CPUs. And then really trying to, refine our storage techniques in the cloud. Next one comes down to kind of model serving here. So like selecting the right frameworks for serving is big. Like, can we automatically deploy these models? Do we have CI/CD built so these pipelines generate your models and push into production automatically? Do you know which models are in production? Can you deploy them from your model garden? Those sort of tools. And again, something else we're investing in is API gateways to really help control access and authentication. So really preserving our clients' data and privacy. Monitoring tools like Prometheus and Grafana are great. We're also building some custom ones with some custom LLMs to look at. And then lastly is just scalability. Can you horizontally scale, vertically scale? Auto scaling is huge for cost optimization, especially the ability to scale to zero in the cloud is huge for us. All right, and with that, I'll kick it back to Eunice.
Thank you, Kylie. Whenever we're in the same room, I learn something new. Thank you. Before we go into the next section, I just want to ask you a quick question, and that also came up in the chat here. How do you see an enterprise, take RealPage as an example, making a decision that an LLM is effectively the solution to a given business problem? Why can't it be something smaller, something simpler, or just anything like that?
Good question. So the first thing I always look at is kind of like the complexity of tasks. LLMs are beneficial for tasks that require kind of deep understandings of context, nuanced language interpretation, generating hopefully coherent and textually relevant responses. The next is kind of like the volume and variety of data. I kind of think of this from both sides. Do you have a ton of data, of unstructured data, such as emails, customer service interactions, or something like that, that can leverage LLMs to analyze? The other is, do you not have any data? Like LLMs are really good at few-shot learning, or even just general tasks of pulling out keywords and stuff from text. The other is kind of scalability and flexibility. So, they can handle a wide range of tasks from text summarization to entity extraction to generation without necessarily needing that task-specific tuning, which can be a huge advantage, and really future-looking, kind of future-proof your tech stack against some of that. And then applications that require like high accuracy and performance, especially where that's critical, such as like legal documents or something like that, right? LLMs are going to provide superior results. But at the end of the day, it comes down to cost-benefit analysis, right? Does the productivity and efficiency make sense? So yeah, that's what I got.
Great. Thank you so much for that. All right. I think the next section we have here is a pop quiz for our audience. No, I'm kidding. It's a poll question. So when it comes to implementing LLMs in the context of an enterprise-wide use case, what do we believe the key challenge to be? Security, reliability and scalability, management complexity, integration with existing systems, compliance, or all of the above? Let's see what we got here. I think we need a few more votes. Don't be shy. Okay. Looks like security is our winner right now. I don't know if I see an option for all of the above, but that could very well be a consideration as well. Okay, we're about 45% of the audience who voted. Let's give it a little bit more time. Close to 50%. Security is still up there, but now I'm starting to see some balanced answers. Getting close to all of the above here. Just a few more seconds. Okay, thank you to our audience for answering the poll question. And yeah, I think based on the results we're seeing here, I'm honestly not surprised to hear that security and reliability and scalability are the biggest challenges and concerns here. So with that, Amr, actually, this is a great segue to your section to talk about the challenges that you've seen and things that you learned in terms of infrastructure considerations when implementing LLM. So with that, take it away, please.
Thank you, Yunus. Hello, everyone. My name is Amar Gowda. I'm part of the AI incubations team, leading few initiatives for OCI. So it's exciting to be here and be part of this panel. I want to walk you through what OCI has to offer in this space, and also take questions if you have as along. So next slide, please. So OCI's footprint is large. There are very smallest data centers and regions out there, and quickly expanding. For example, in US, we are adding more US based data centers. So if you look at the footprint here, it's, if you're more about security and compliance, wanting to have, make sure the data does not leave the bounds of what you're looking for, you may have GDPR compliance. We have a lot of regions out there, even with GPUs, and we continue to expand with most of our NVIDIA as well as AMD GPU stacks out there. So the wide region availability for controlling that data within the bounds of the country, there are plenty of offerings and regions available out there from OCI side. Most of these regions have CPU capability, and the GPUs are coming up as we ramp up our data centers with GPUs. So next slide, please. So this slide is not talking about all the other OCI services. This is specifically talking about with LLMs, it's always about the data, right? Either using the data for fine tuning, or you're doing embeddings and doing RAG, which is retrieval augmentation, which is you're augmenting the responses of a base pre-trained model with results that are relevant to a business. It's all about the data you handle. So this is showing you a set of services that can help you build that end to end that is needed in a fully PaaS fashion, or just a platform as a service, or you can as well choose to host your own in your boundaries or tenancies as well. So a couple of things, we also released a 23 AI offering, which is our vector DB built on top of Oracle DB as an instance. So you could continue to choose that as one of your backend store for your embeddings as well. So this is kind of a layout of what all you can choose in OCI today to achieve your tasks. So next slide, please. So all of these services, the way OCI has is in dedicated regions. We also have what we call as Alloy, which Oracle becomes a data center hosting provider for you, but you can white label your offerings on top of our compute and resell the our compute. That is what our Alloy offering is. We also have a lot of sovereign cloud initiatives that are smaller regions, specifically in Europe, where we have tight GDPR controls in place that doesn't allow for the logs and others to be collected for any reason. So these give you that flexibility of deploying infrastructure. The most critical thing is OCI is very cost to performant efficient with most of our solutions, and we have a very straightforward pricing model than any other cloud provider. So it should give you a pretty straightforward way for you to decide what, for example, all of our US regions are priced the same. So is the Europe regions and others. So these should matter. It's all about the cost. GPUs are expensive, as everybody knows, and there were a lot of conversations with others in the previous panelists about how you can be cost efficient. And I'll walk you through a few scenarios where you can be cost efficient with what you choose. Next slide, please. You can build this up completely. Yeah, thank you. So there are plenty of customers who are looking for GPUs. The way where we are in the phase we are in, there's plenty of startups as well as large investments going on in building the foundation LLM models that requires a lot more compute power. If you look at our roadmap, we have pretty much most of the NVIDIA GPU offerings either in-house already available for you to choose and run, as well as in the pipeline. For example, the Grace Blackwell 200 announcements that happened recently. So the bigger your models and more complex they get, they would need more compute power, and OCI has a lot more offerings to choose. But if you look at the left side of it, right, we also have smaller sized offerings that could be very much fit for what you're trying to do, right? For example, a small size model does not really need a GB200. It's just way too expensive if you're doing is just inferencing. So this will allow you to choose right size compute based on the workloads you choose. And I saw Kylie mention about the CPUs as an option. So we have heavily invested in our ARM and Ampere based CPUs, and efficiently also blogged about how we can run CPUs for inference, and especially less than 15 billion size models very efficiently. And you can also do a RAG as part of that whole flow as well. So a combination of that allows you to quickly run some experiments and show immediate value to your business before you ramp up for going to production. So CPUs can be a very viable option, and as well as run batched inferencing, which are latency tolerant. So a combination of that. So these set of offerings will give you a wide range to choose from. Besides bare metal, like bare metal comes with, does not come with any virtualized hardware. You can pick your own virtualized hardware. You can put your own virtualization stack on top of it and run it yourself to virtualize even further. We are also working towards our first class virtualized offerings for most of these coming up. Right now, we can also run bare metal offerings through Oracle Kubernetes engine that can be more efficient by running bare metal nodes as part of OKE and managing these infrastructure efficiently. So this is the kind of what is possible. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of success stories. Uber is one of them, and to FedEx, and plenty of the foundation models that are built are leveraging Oracle's GPU infrastructure today to build this. It's very cost efficient, reliable. We also have RDMA interconnected clusters that allow you to scale up for, especially if you're doing ML training exercise. So a lot of success stories around building LLM models as well as serving these models efficiently. And we also recently announced our close partnership with OpenAI that they're choosing as an extended data center for running most of the training and inference workloads with Oracle as well. That kind of talks through the reliability and the cost efficiency of Oracle Cloud offerings. So this is the last slide. I'm handing it back to you, Yunus.
Thank you, Amar. This was great, and it's always a pleasure working with you and partnering with you on all these initiatives. Before we transition to the next section, I want to ask you one question, which is if you can name one myth or misconception you've heard about infrastructure, specifically for LLMs, what would that be? I think our audience will appreciate that.
Sure, it's very expensive. Right? So the cost part is, doing an exercise of LLMs need a lot of GPU and compute power. It's always super expensive to start. We need big budgets. Not really, right? So you need to think about the scenario, the workload in mind, and what the workload needs are, right? For example, you don't need a H100 if what you're serving is just 10 or 15 users and requests for that, right? So the right size compute is critical as part of this decision process, and that's the myth we want to break. CPUs, for example, are still a more viable option for you, right? I think we've emphasized enough about CPUs. So we lived this in the traditional ML world, right? So we have done this previously. So that's that one thing I would call out. Reliability is equally important, but I think the cost of the infrastructure to get POCs and show that real value is a myth right now.
Sounds good. And I love that we call it traditional ML, knowing that time series forecasting is the biggest moneymaker right now for most enterprises.
That's true.
Thank you. All right, we'll transition to the next section. And I have a few slides that I'd like to share about Waller's perspective on LLMs, working closely with our partners and customers. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, please. So today, actually, with the emergence of Gen AI services and basically all the associated models that we're seeing, ChatGPT and what have you, enterprises effectively started to feel the pressure to adopt AI. And there's right now a race towards who's going to have the competitive edge, and effectively what it means to have to share that you're adopting LLMs and generative AI. So every customer we have been talking to in the past 6 months, or every sales call have been on, started with this question: what are you doing with generative AI? Is there a silver bullet that you can help us with? So in terms of basically looking inwards and also asking some questions, surveying our customers and partners, we started to actually unpack the challenges behind these questions when we see that the adoption has not been as fast as we expected it to be. And the key challenge has been really just what we have been discussing all along, which is unrealized time to value, or ROI. And basically, when looking at the contributing factors to that, it boils down to three things. There's the engineering complexity to effectively fine-tune and operationalize LLMs. We talked about the size of the model, the size of data that you're dealing with, the use case, how can you actually right-size the engineering to the problem that you're solving. The other one is the one that Amar just shared, which is inference infrastructure cost and availability. So even if you're using the managed services, the token cost is something that is not negligible. And then if you go and build your own, it comes down to GPU cost, GPU availability, how can you actually work with it? And then assuming you overcome the first two and you stand up your LLMs or your endpoints in production, how can you actually ensure that they're reliable, effective, they're not introducing any security concerns, any compliance risks, any bias, any hallucinations. So those are really the top 3 challenges that we have identified through our conversations. Next slide, please. So when it comes to our perspective on best practices for ensuring effective LLMs in production, it boils down to 3 metrics, and honestly, those I call those customer success metrics from our perspective. They revolve around speed, quality, and quantity. So when you think about speed, it's really that focus on time to value. And as Amr just presented, there's an ecosystem out there that should be leveraged and to a certain extent celebrated to actually enable quick deployment, monitoring, and iterations of production LLMs in terms of basically the tools that are available there. How can you actually make sure that they work nicely together so that you can stand up your LLMs quickly and start learning? That's actually one of the pillars of the Wallaroo platform and how we actually focused on ecosystem integrations to enable quick time to value. Now, as you stand up your LLMs, this idea of continuous monitoring and iteration to maximize performance and reduce exposure or risk exposure while controlling the disruption that these might cause is something that we're relentlessly focusing on by ensuring that there is a reliable tooling for monitoring, for iteration, for managing, updating the models, whether it's an LLM or a traditional machine learning model. And then finally, ensuring the ability to automate and scale. So as you start effectively deploying the first, second, third use case, there's going to be more opportunities that will present themselves. And how can you actually create a repeatable and industrial grade set of operations for your LLMs with modularity, flexibility, and minimal infrastructure complexity? That's going back to what Kylie shared earlier about the model garden and also the tooling that exists to enable serving many customers at scale. Next slide, please. So when it comes to Wallaroo, in terms of our capabilities today, how can we effectively ensure that we drive robust, efficient, and lower cost LLMs in production, or LLM inference in production? We have 3 pillars of our platform today when it comes to LLMs. It's about deployment, monitoring, and quick iterations. That's basically how we go from something that is in prototype stage to something creating value in production. And with that, we focus on these 4 core capabilities that are centered around reducing time to production. So our auto packaging of models gets you stood up quickly with your LLMs or your models in production. Infrastructure optimization with the ability to quickly run on CPU, GPU, whether it's also NVIDIA, Intel, ARM, Ampere. That's something that we have been investing heavily to actually ensure that flexibility, and then building the tooling to drive scale through automation, make sure that there is a continuous integration, continuous deployment of models in the production setting. And then finally, the monitoring iterations through LLMs as they get stood up in production, as I mentioned, to ensure that that we're limiting risk and ensuring lack of or no hallucinations with the LLMs. Next slide, please. So on that last point, I would like to quickly introduce one of our new solutions that we just launched. It's our LLM monitoring solution, and basically the genesis of this solution comes from what we have been presenting all along, which is this perception, another myth that now that you can connect to a ChatGPT service and you have access to an endpoint, you can easily integrate it behind your application. You're off to the races. It's basically the same problem that we saw in traditional ML, which is standing up the inference endpoint is the end of the game or the end of the road. It's actually not true. And with LLMs and the big LLMs, the risk is even higher. We've seen stories, we've heard stories about hallucinations and lawsuits and what have you. So we actually have been working with our customers and partners in the past 6 months to come up with this solution that ensures that there is a robust monitoring and validation or guardrails on LLMs as they get stood up, whether it's a custom homegrown LLM or even a managed service, with a set of basically this library of what we call LLM listeners that we actually orchestrate to run behind the inference endpoint. And they will effectively be tuned to score LLMs for metrics that can be predefined or standard metrics. Think toxicity, think sentiment analysis, think even hallucination or quality or accuracy, or some custom metrics that may be adapted to an enterprise use case. Think, as Zainab mentioned earlier, if you're building a digital campaign, how can you actually score customer intent from that? So, and with that, we actually produce a set of metrics and alerts that ensure that in real time you're proactively making sure that the LLM is effective and it's tied directly to your business metrics and goals. So that was the last slide in my presentation. The next slide has some artifacts around where to find us and as well as our technical documentation. And with that, we have about 10 minutes, and I would like to transition to a poll question that we'd like to ask and invite our panelists to turn on their cameras. So based on what we have been discussing so far, do you believe that enterprises that are able to harness LLMs will have a competitive advantage in the near and long term? I think I expect that one to be yes across the board, but I don't want to ruin the quiz. Sorry, it was supposed to be a poll question. All right, let's give it a few more seconds. All right, 100% yes. That's great. I think we have LLM believers here in the audience, which is great. Okay, I think we can transition to our panel. There are a few questions that that we have here. Zainab, I think there's one question here. Would you like to go ahead and actually read it to us? And we'll take turns in answering it.
Sure. So the question reads, if you were to assess the impact of an LLM today on an enterprise, what would be the kind of common measures that one can use to really monitor their business impact? Just want to open it up to the panel.
Yeah, I think I can take a first stab at that one. From my perspective, as someone who's always building product, it's really two things: benefit and cost. Basically, what value will they create? And then based on that value, what resources do you need to invest in it? And the resources are known. It's the talent that you have, as well as the infrastructure that you have to be able to build, as well as the data, of course. And yeah, I think going back to the answer about value does not have to be how many dollars I'm going to generate in additional revenue or incremental revenue, or how much cost I might be reducing. Value can also translate to your reputation, your ESG score, your messaging as an organization, how sustainable it is. We've actually seen those with some of our customers and brands that we work with. So it's really around the trade-offs between the two, and having a clear line of sight on those two metrics, in my opinion, would set enterprises for success. Kylie, anything you'd like to add on this one?
Sure. Yeah. I think as far as metrics go, different use cases will have distinct objectives, and therefore, there's probably tailored metrics for assessment. So I would encourage you to think outside of the box a little bit on some of these. For example, let's say your LLMs for a customer support bot, right? Well, one of the metrics we want to look at is first response time. How long does it take to respond? But also, what's the resolution rate? Like how many issues are resolved without human intervention? And big one I always like to look at with some of these is customer satisfaction rate, your CSAT score that you just mentioned, scores from customer feedback. And then really quick, other ones for other use cases, you might have something that generates like website content, right? So what's the SEO performance of that content that's generated, or error rate or production speed, or even the content quality, having copywriters assess it. So those
Great.
are a few extra I would throw out.
Thank you, Kylie. I think we have time for another question. And Zainab, I might actually start with you for this one. What is an acceptable timeline for implementing enterprise-grade LLMs once they are vetted as a viable solution to a given use case?
So I think one of the things that we are learning is that LLMs, like any other technology in the past, like whether you're traditional ML or AI, doesn't stand alone. It is kind of embedded as part of whole ecosystem or a workflow where you have data, you have process, you have people, and so to really go from that proof of concept to a real production and really unlock the value that they can bring, I would say looking at a 3 to 9 month horizon at least makes sense, because from the time of having that idea of you want to use it for this kind of a workflow to really prepping, like I mentioned in our conceptual framework as well, is that you really need to prep and have the data and the process and where this LLM will fit into your business value or business ecosystem thought through. And so that does take time to really bring all the data and everything in a place where these models can really leverage and learn from. And so I would say kind of looking at that 3 to 9 months, at least kind of an horizon for really unlocking true value from these LLMs would make sense.
Thank you, Zainab. Amr, anything you'd like to add?
I hit the wrong button. I think, yeah, 3 to 9 months is how we see it. Keep in mind, there are innovators, right? Like businesses who are trying to add a lot of value quickly, who want to go faster. And there are some traditional companies where Gen AI is trying to augment few things and improve the productivity, right? For them, for those scenarios, the timeline can be a little longer. But what we have seen success stories are there are a lot of experiments that are happening, right? There is no such thing like, oh, let's bake this for next 2 years and launch it. Everybody's trying to put something out there, iterate faster, put another experiment out there, iterate faster, and see what is producing good results. This is all about data science, right? This is we have seen this happen pretty often where the cycles are less than 6 months. You try to evaluate multiple things, you put a label that it's beta, the answers may be wrong, not accurate, but you still iterate faster. So you have to bring your business users in this journey. This is critical, right? Just not showing up, oh, this is here to make it life simple and people try it. I'm like, it's not helping me, right? So it's a mixed bag. So 3 months to 9 months is what I would agree to as well.
That's great. That's it. Yeah, great set of answers, great perspectives. And I know we have less than 2 minutes left. So with that, I very much want to thank our presenters and panelists today for their time, their perspectives, and also the team that helped organize the event on the Wallower side. Just some key takeaways that I wanted to share before we end the event. 3 things, actually. Flexibility to deploy LLMs based on specific enterprise constraints, whether it's infrastructure costs, security, compliance, what have you, is key to ensuring effective LLMs in production at the end of the day. And we've been saying this throughout the presentation, value comes from tying them to tangible business goals. If there's no business goals defined, then we're experimenting. We're in the 90% that fail to create ROI. And then finally, efficient deployment, monitoring, iterations on LLMs are key to driving the tremendous value from LLMs and their implementations in the enterprise. So with that, I want to share, again, say thank you to our audience, to our presenters, to the team who supported this event. The recording and materials will be available and they will be sent to the registered attendees. And with that, thank you all for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one.